The TPP, which was finalized in February 2016, will reduce barriers and focus on small business exports by cutting tariffs and reducing non-tariff barriers, opening the fast-growing Pacific Rim region of the world. The 12 countries in the TPP represent about 40% of global GDP and account for about 1/3 of global trade. Metro Atlanta right now is already the 13th largest exporter in the U.S., with more than 150,000 jobs in the metropolitan Atlanta region that are supported by the TPP. Georgia exported 37% of its goods, about $14.4 billion, to TPP countries in 2011, and we expect that number to continue to climb. Nationally, 11.7 million jobs are supported by countries that make up the TPP market. And we came today because we intend to see that this bill was passed. And the president asked for our thinking on how it will get passed. One of the best quotes that I've heard around TPP came from a former U.S. ambassador, and he said something that I think resonates certainly with our group. What he said is that people who run for office often campaign against trade, but people who become president of the United States end up supporting trade. There are a number of very important reasons for us not to let this matter fail. And the most important in my mind really is determining who's going to set the rules of the road. We have been working on this transaction for more than 5 years. The President and Ambassador Froman have done an exceptional job negotiating a very favorable agreement that is now becoming known to the world. If we want to make sure that the United States continues to lead and continues to set the rules of the road with 40% of the global GDP, we need to get this deal done. One of the other factors that isn't mentioned enough is that the TPP group also forms the basis for more than 40% of future GDP growth. And so once again, we think that it is in America's vital interest and in the interest of small towns across the United States of America to see that this bill is passed. Businesses that engage in international trade are more successful, pay higher wages to their workers. And so we have come together to make sure that in this season, with so much political noise and gamespersonship, that a bill that is vital to the United States' long-term interests doesn't get left aside. And with that, I would like to bring forward the Governor of Ohio, Governor Kasich. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I think the Mayor has done a great job of laying out the economics implications of this agreement. But I think we now have a unique opportunity, again, to put country in front of politics. I think that many of the people that are in the Congress of the United States understand what this is all about. They understand the implications of trade. But there's one other thing that I think they all understand, and all of us in this room need to reflect on this. The two nations that most vociferously oppose this agreement are China. You look at Xi, I'm astounded every day about another repressive technique that he uses to control his people, even going so far as to try to regulate or dismantle the youth involvement in politics in China. Xi's been very repressive, and not only that, we're all clearly aware that it's been the reluctance of Xi and the Chinese to put the pressure that needs to be put on North Korea. They walked away from it, leaving the rest of the world wondering what to do and bringing up issues about mutual security. Vladimir Putin probably wakes up every day thinking about how he can complete the work he started in the Crimea, thinks about Ukraine and how much he'd like to gobble it up, or even the the kind of actions he's now taking to threaten the Balkans. I'm sorry, the Baltics. So, folks, it's really pretty simple. Economically, trade always makes sense. Are there losers in trade? Yes, there are. And that's why it's important that we have a system that can retrain people for the jobs of the future. Frankly, if you don't trade, you hurt consumers. If you don't trade, you hurt innovation. If you don't train, you withdraw from the world. But from the geopolitical sense, it is absolutely critical that the United States stand with many of these nations that are in some ways economically weak, including a nation like Vietnam that is now asking us to work with them to develop a strong partnership that would have an economic underpinning. But that economic underpinning is absolutely going to lead to a strengthened sense of America's influence in Asia. Could you imagine if the United States of America decided, as I told one congressman this morning, if we turned our back on those nations in Asia that are looking to us in a great sense of partnership to give them the courage and the strength to stand against a rising China? So both from an economic point of view and a geopolitical point of view, where will we be if we turn this down? And this is what gives us a unique opportunity again in this city that I've come to not quite understand, that these kinds of issues is where politics goes out the window and where the good of America has to be represented and has to be respected. I appreciate the President inviting the group that we had in there this morning. He's very passionate about the need to do this. He's willing to work with those who are both for and against, and he's willing to really put his shoulder to the wheel. For me, I've got two 16-year-old daughters. I worry about the future of this country. America can't afford to lock the doors and lower the blinds and ignore the rest of the world. We're a force for good. And this TPP will help us not only on the economic side, but will also allow us to continue to be a strong world leader for good. Repression, lack of human rights, lack of democracy that some of these opponents to this deal support is not something that the United States should take lightly. I would call on my former colleagues in the House and the Senate to think here over the next couple weeks about the implications of saying no and what it will mean for our future, and the fact that they can cast a vote that can strengthen our country and our alliances around the world. To me, that's what's at stake, and frankly, that's why I'm here today.
Thank
Josh?
you, Governor. All right. Scott, do you want to start?
The President described this as a strategizing session. Can you guys talk a little bit about what strategy you've come up with? And since I don't think politics is going to go out the window, how you're going to put political pressure on the House and Senate?
Well, you know, I think part of it is the President of the United States, in a quiet way, without, press conferences or blaring trumpets, needs to meet with a group of people who we know are not likely to support this, but they don't want to see it die. I mean, I understand politics. Sometimes people can just sort of register their objection and kind of leave the floor or leave the meetings and let matters proceed. I think that's part of it. I also think that the business community, I was never a big fan of this Import-Export Bank, but the business community did a very effective job in talking about the fact that this is about jobs. We had a great, brilliant woman in there today, the head of IBM, and I think the suggestion to her is to make sure that the employees of IBM let members of Congress know that this is about my job, this is about my family, this is about my community. So I think there's multiple ways in which this message can get out. But I also happen to think the national security message is something that should resonate with every single member of Congress. So I think there will be an aggressive move on this. I guess I'm an optimist. I kind of think that at the end of the day, with the right appeals, people put their country ahead of political concerns. And I saw it the entire time I was here for 18 years, and I've seen it in the state of Ohio. With the right group of people being involved, you can pull things out and have a good victory.
Mayor Reed, you want to add something?
We think a few things. One, we think that this is a country first moment, and we believe that if you have a strong feeling and belief in American exceptionalism, that you need to be a part of this effort, and we think that that is going to help us carry the day. We also happen to believe that there are a number of folks who should demonstrate and have great affection for this president, certainly at this point in his tenure. And we intend to compete vigorously for their support. And so there will be the strategy of the facts, which is that this is the right thing for America. We cannot leave 40% of future GDP growth to the whims and fortunes of the Chinese. We don't think that that's the smart approach. And we think that that will move us part of the way. And then we think that another part of the way will be with those individuals who are loyal to the president and who want to help him get this bill across the line. And there is a very strong feeling that there will be a moment when that vote is appropriate. What we can't do is be sitting on our hands and be on our heels. And so that's why we're here today, to start having a very detailed approach to how we're going to get this done at the right moment with a broad bipartisan coalition.
Josh.
Governor Kasich, we couldn't help but notice in the Oval Office earlier that you were shaking your head when the question came up about your party's presidential nominee re-injecting the birtherism issue into the election. Could you take us a little into what was going through your mind?
Well, what I was really thinking is that, Bruce Springsteen has to be really happy because Born in the USA is probably going to sell a lot more albums. That's as far as I would go. I mean, what am I thinking about it? I'm here for TPP and what's happening in the world, not talking about where somebody was born.
Good. Rob.
Can I just ask, when you're talking about how politicians run against trade but then change their position essentially, are you saying that both of the leading candidates for president are now doing something disingenuous and that they are both going to flip their position at some point regardless of the outcome of this election?
No.
What does it say about our politics and what does it say about...
No, I'm not casting aspersions on either of the candidates. What I'm saying is if you just look at history, despite what has happened in the campaign process, when people actually occupy the office and look at the data and see what it does for the American people, the 11.7 million jobs that are being supported in the 11 partner countries here, that once people are in office and have the awesome responsibility of the presidency, they change. That said, to get to your question, my sense isn't that either of these candidates would flip, which is why I think it's so important that we pass TPP right now, because I actually don't believe that it will flip. But this needs to get done for the United States of America, and there will be a moment to get it done. And as you know from being in this town for a long time, you can't just jump up and try to engage in this process. You got to stay at it.
Right. If you don't think they'll flip, this was a concern that a lot of leaders in Asia expressed. The president acknowledged that in his comments. They wonder what the future is, and America's credibility is on the line here. So what do you say to them when, admittedly, you think there's going to be a problem for this deal, even if it passes?
No, here's what I think will happen. I think if we pass this deal, it will be honored by the next president of the United States. And I think it's very important that we pass this bill. And it's a priority for the president. What the president made clear in no uncertain terms was that this was a priority, and he was willing to work very hard on it.
I want to say something that concerns me. We had an article today in the Wall Street Journal. I get reactions like, well, you're a Republican. Why are you supporting something that the president wants? I mean, we cannot get to the point in America that because a Democrat wants something that you happen to agree with, you can't agree with them. There's plenty of things that I disagree with President Obama on. But the idea that I'm a Republican and therefore I can't work with Democrats, or you're a Democrat and you can't work with Republicans, how does anybody think that the issues of debt, Social Security, Medicare, health care, any of these issues are going to be resolved when we spend all of our time fighting with one another? You see, I don't recognize this town much anymore, because now it's become so much about politics. And when politics is the order of the day and partisanship trumps country, we drift. We drift as a nation. And I'm extremely concerned about what I see. This is a moment for people to begin to reverse that, to think deep inside of themselves about what matters when it comes to public service.
But Governor Kasich,
Hold on. Let's go. Margaret?
Probably not going to want to hear this, but I'd like to take what you just said and segue back to the 2016 race then. I think the issue is not that everyone's trying to drag you away from TPP and into a different conversation. It's that the dominant conversation is the one about the election that's about to happen. And now, a month and a half, 2 months before the election, Donald Trump just came out and did like a drop the mic moment where he said that he's the one who resolved the birther controversy. It was Hillary Clinton's fault that there ever was one. And does this go to your point about partisanship trumping the good of the country? I mean, I think we're not trying to distract you from what you're here to talk about.
In a presidential campaign, we've seen a lot of them. And every one, of course, is always defined as the most important one we've ever had in our history. But the fact of the matter is that goes on. But this vote, ultimately, by the current Congress of the United States, gets decided by the current makeup of the United States Senate and the United States House. And I happen to believe that I don't want to try to ever project how anybody else is thinking, but this is a serious matter. And when I see the presidential campaign going on, it's almost a surreal 21st century presidential election. That if you and I had drafted a movie script about everything that was going to be happening on both sides with both candidates, or even the whole process, they would have thrown us out of their offices out in Hollywood, because they would have said this is a fiction that goes well beyond any fiction that would be acceptable. So I understand that, but we have to stay focused on the things that matter. And I'm focused very much on the things that matter in my state. And now with this, I'm focused not only on something that affects my state, but something that affects my country. So, I watch with some surprise, but I also have to tell you that how amazed I am with the fascination of the media on really easy stories. Things that get eyeballs and, generates ratings and therefore generates money. I know, look, I like the media. I was once in the media. I may be back in the media again. But there's a point at which, I think that journalists you have to be responsible. You report whatever story you want, any story you feel strongly about. But if the issue is how many clicks can I get and how much can I get paid, then that drifts into an area that I think we all have to think about, because I believe we all have to live a life a little bigger than ourselves. And so, food for thought.
But Governor, I got to ask you, respectfully, you ran for president on this issue, other issues as well, and you lost.
Yeah.
Donald Trump ran opposing this, calling it the worst trade
Right.
deal in the history of mankind or something, and he won. Hillary Clinton opposed it. Bernie Sanders opposed it. How is it right for Congress in a lame duck session to go against what was clearly the will of the voters through the election process? Yeah. And I've got to just ask you one more thing on Donald Trump. I mean, do you agree with Hillary Clinton that he owes the president an apology for 5 years denying that he was born in America, for denying the obvious?
Yeah. I'm a person that's usually pretty direct, but I'm not stepping on my own message today by talking about that. Now, number two.
It's got to bug you, though, right?
Oh, no, there's a lot of things that bug me. A chili dip shot on the 15th hole bugs me. I mean, this is just life. This is politics. But look, John, I don't happen to believe that with these specific issues, whether it's the wall or whether it's trade, I mean, you give me $2 billion worth of publicity, and I probably could even beat you, John. But here's the thing that I want to suggest. I have never been an ideological supporter of free trade. The ideologues used to come to me and were frustrated with me. David Dreyer is one of them from California. Well, what's wrong with you, or Kemp, or any of these people? But when you look at these agreements in a real sense, and this one much different than even NAFTA, because John, this is China, this is Russia. These are fledgling countries in Asia, and we want to pivot to Asia. We have to do this. I think there's something that the mayor has said that's fairly accurate. You know, sometimes in campaigns, people will say things only to find out later, oops. I used to say during the campaign, do you know how many promises people make when they run for president and they never carry them out? But look, this is an opportunity for the Congress to carry out its responsibility. And because, you know, somebody didn't support a trade agreement who's running for president, so what? We disagree with presidents. I disagree with this president on a lot of things, okay? But I happen to agree with him strongly on this thing. So, you know, I don't think because we have this presidential election that somehow the Congress that's sitting there shouldn't be able to move forward on this agreement, particularly when I think it's vital. So, and I don't think it's those issues that really are the ones that I think there are a lot of people in America who feel very frustrated. They feel very vulnerable. You know how I understand it? Because I grew up in it. Where I grew up in McKees Rocks was a town, if the wind blew the wrong way, people found themselves out of work. And sometimes simple proposals to solve difficult problems sell, but they never work. They never work. Blaming somebody's loss of a job on somebody from Mexico that came in and took your job, that's a simple way to scapegoat, no matter who they are, whether it's, or Bernie and his business of the only reason why you don't have something because all the rich people in the world, you know, they took what you have. I just think that's just wrong. And I know it's boring to have complicated solutions to complicated problems, but we'll end up back there. We will end up back there, mark my words, or we will drift.
Who will you vote for
All right,
president?
hold on. Mark,
Are you on the ballot?
Margaret, go ahead.
Governor Kasich, then to follow up on what you were just laying out, are you saying then, as the mayor suggested, that this is just pure political expediency on the part of both the Democratic and the Republican presidential nominees to oppose this free trade deal? And what do you think that streak of protectionism in both parties is being fed off?
Well, I think Hillary was once for it, till she was against it. I think was that a quote from some other thing? So, you know, she moved there. I mean.
And you think she'll move back?
Oh, I have no idea. That's why I want to do this now, because, you know, you got to get this done. I mean, look, I'd love to think it could happen next year. I'm not convinced it can happen after this year. No, what I'm suggesting, and I'm not questioning, you know, where either of the candidates' real heart is. I can't discern where their heart is. But what I can say is oftentimes when people run, you know, when I ran for governor, there were a lot of things that I thought I could do. When I got in there, I felt, oh, well, you know what? It's not that simple. I can actually tell you, I remember saying I was going to abolish the highway patrol. They're like armed revenue agents until I figured out what they did. So, you know, sometimes as you run, you don't have the sense of, you know, the heaviness, the gravity of decision making, as the mayor will tell you. It's very hard to be the mayor of Atlanta. You know, when you run for mayor of Atlanta, I'll bet, you know, he said, I'm going to do this and do that, and then you get in and you still stick to your principles, but with sophistication and understanding, leaders evolve. They don't change. I mean, this is not like, you know, you change colors or anything like that, but you learn more and you lead. And so I don't know where these candidates will ultimately be, but what I know is there's a chance for the House and the Senate to actually do something, and here's what I do believe. I believe there are people both in the House and the Senate that will play pure politics with our future to take care of themselves. And let me also suggest to you, when that's what you do, when you leave Washington, you didn't accomplish anything other than what? Obstruct? Look, I've been involved in more fights on Capitol Hill than about anybody within my party and with the other party. But at the end, you have to accomplish something. And sometimes politics today in this town, it's overwhelming us. We all know it. What are we, kidding ourselves? There's too much politics and not enough caring about being an American. Am I right?
You're right.
Thank you.
If I could just follow, Governor, whether you're in Parma or mayor in Dunwoody somewhere, I just want you to make it really simple for the guys driving the pickup truck He just wants to understand why this matters. Because I think when you're awash in it, it's easy maybe to make the compelling argument in a room like this, but for people who are not dealing with this day to day, they want to know, how is this going to affect my life, this TPP?
Well, I'll tell you, there was a receptionist that I think we almost got disciplined because the Republican governor of the state of Georgia and I showed up to urge the president to support funding of the deepening of the Port of Savannah, which happens to be one of the fastest growing ports in America. And ultimately it was funded. If you go to the Port of Savannah, you see those jobs that everybody in America is talking about. You see a longshoreman that can put his kids through school and know that his children's going to go to college. And so the kind and quality of jobs that everybody is talking about in America comes from investments in international trade. The Port of Savannah supports 150,000 jobs in the metropolitan region. That's why I was sitting next to a Republican governor asking that the Port of Savannah receive support, not Atlanta. So I think what we have to do is to go back to jobs. All of this is a competition for talent. I happen to believe that technology is a far more destructive force in many areas than global trade. Global trade is just more convenient to whack at because you don't want to beat up on your iPad or your computer because we love them all so much. So it's easy to talk about global trade. I go back to jobs, jobs, jobs. Businesses that engage in international trade, we're only 1% of small businesses. Just imagine if we take our small businesses and move them from 1 to 4 to 5%, the impact it has on our GDP. And finally, I'll close with this. I love America. And right now, America makes up somewhere between 21 stays the case. To the extent that we maintain the influence and America's wealth, we ensure that our values can be shared across the country. So one, I think a deep love of country, and where are we generating the highest quality of jobs that are exactly the kind that we've been talking about over the last 12 to 16 months.
Let me. Good job, Mayor. Look, I mean, first of all, for the consumer, you shut down trade, you will get products that cost more and don't have quality. So to the truck driver, I mean, you want to have textiles or cars or whatever it is that are not as good and cost you more, go ahead. Secondly, I know those truck drivers. I grew up in a blue-collar town. They love our country. Our folks in the truck driving blue-collar world don't want to turn power over to the Chinese or the Russians. They love America. That's another given. Let me tell you one other thing. We are a country. We are now a knowledge nation. We supply the ideas, the brain power to move things, to bring about progress. Progress defined as improving our standard of living. That truck driver's worried about his or her kids. The biggest problem we have today is that our education system at all levels is not preparing our children for the jobs of today and the jobs of tomorrow. Furthermore, we also don't have the capability to retrain somebody. And we want to talk about somebody left behind? Yeah, a 53-year-old man or woman who one day heard they were out of work and now they don't know what to do. You see, the whole system has broken down. We have an education system that reflects the way we lived 100 years ago. We've got a higher education system that costs too much and doesn't appropriately provide kids with the skills that they need. And we do not have a job retraining system in this country. That should come with any trade deal, because there will be some people who will be displaced. But you know, where I grew up in Pittsburgh, we had steel mills. For anybody that reads the New York Times on Sunday, there was an incredible article about 500 people in Pittsburgh growing to 1,000 who are involved with Uber in autonomous vehicles. We may no longer make the iPhone. We don't manufacture the iPhone, but we created the iPhone. And these knowledge jobs pay a lot more. So to that truck driver, you're going to get your children a good education. We're going to train them for an entire lifetime. And they're going to be living in an exciting world of drones and autonomous vehicles and iPhones and Skype and all this incredible stuff that we see every single day. We can't go backwards to buggy whips. We have to go forward to these exciting new innovations that will mean more wages, better jobs, more consistent work, but we need to change everything. I mentioned to the president before I left, he and I had a little bit of time together, the whole education system, it all needs to be changed. I want to ask you, you all have children, I think Josh is going to wrap this up. Do you think we're training your children for the jobs of today, the jobs of tomorrow? Most young people will have between 5 and 10 jobs in a lifetime. Are we giving them the resilience, the knowledge, and the capability to be flexible and to have a great life? We need to do that for our kids. We need to forget about politics and everything else and start to do it. So,
Good.
Josh,
Thank
thank
you,
you.
If you were
Governor,
the
thank
nominee,
you.
would you be